The Joyful Friar podcast is made possible by the generous support of our friends. To support the podcast, please visit nathan-castle.com and donate today. Hello and welcome to this episode of the Joyful Friar podcast. I'm Father Nathan Castle, your host. Today I'll be introducing a character whose story was in our third book, the one that's over there to my side. She's a college student. She had a lot of progress toward a PhD in something of a laboratory science. That never came up exactly what kind it was, but something that involved laboratory work. Her name is Lupe. Um, Her story came to me, let's see, it was the night of April the 10th of 2023. Here's what she brought in a dream, and here's how I wrote it down. She did it in a kind of a symbolic way. A young woman had turned down Stanford University to enroll elsewhere. She was caught up in some intrigue about the funding of a project. She had lied about her involvement and was being called on it. At night, at the entrance of an academic building, she was secretly overhearing a conversation that exposed her lie. A man suddenly appeared a short distance away with what appeared to be two large candlesticks. This alarmed her, and I awoke. Well, it wasn't too long after that a couple of my prayer partners and I went into our protected prayer with the angels and the saints and asked how we might be able to help her. Her Today happens to be, I'm recording this on October the 2nd, which in my faith tradition, the Catholic Church, is the feast of the guardian angels. I've known my guardian for decades now, and his name is Philip James of the line of Michael, and he's a constant companion and advocate and resource to me. We use the guardian angels frequently to come on the line when we begin a crossing session. For one thing, the human soul that we're helping to advance that in that session has probably never spoken through another human being's voice before, so they're doing something they've never done. The guardian angel can come on in the line and borrow my voice, or sometimes the voice of another person doing this work, usually me, uh, and they can. It kind of functions as a mic test. It shows the soul that's about to do this how easy it is to do, and in the meanwhile, the guardian often can clarify things that might be indistinct because the nature of dreams has some indistinctness about it or symbology sometimes. So very often we'll have the data that I wrote down in my journal when I awoke from the dream, but often it's nice to have some clarifying information before we get started on our work. And that was the case. Her guardian took the name Angel Shelley, and I've learned that over the years we've been doing this. This isn't necessarily a name that they use all the time, but it's more of a nickname that is employed just with us while we're doing this work. Shelley talked about a shell game, that sleight of hand thing where you put um, a ball or something under shells, and maybe there are three of them, and the person doing the shell game rearranges them so quickly as to make you lose track of what's what. Well, it turned out that Lupe um, got tempted into academic dishonesty. She explained to us that she was um, conceived by parents who never married each other, uh, with I think, a Caucasian man and a Hispanic woman. Her father was never on the scene until very much later in her life, and even then it wasn't a warm relationship. Um, but she was given the name Lupe from Guadalupe, and um, she said there were times in her academic life where she wanted to downplay her Hispanic heritage and look more Caucasian, look more white. There's been a lot in the culture over the last year or two about DEI, uh, and on college campuses, that's been a big deal. Um, Diversity, equity, and inclusion. And there's been a pushback against um, minorities and women advancing because of the perception that they're taking somebody else's rightful place. Well, those things can be fought about at the macro level as long as you have breath to fight, but it does affect real people. And in her case, uh, she wondered if the fact that she was in an elite college working toward a PhD, she wondered if her peers or others around her thought that she was only there because of that kind of governmental policy. She was, um, unfortunately, she was um, over concerned about what people thought of her in a way that ended up being very detrimental. So, I mean, who in this audience can't appreciate when hasn't there been a time when when you had an idea about how you were perceived, your reputation, and were nervous about what people thought of you? Think junior high at the very least. But that kind of thing can follow a person through their life, that idea that I'm not enough or people won't respect me or don't see the my worth. Anyway, this kind of thing was part of her life. She explained to us that from very early on, she was academically talented, and in childhood and her, elementary and an earlier school career, she was frequently awarded things, honors, because she was top of her class. There were teachers who opened up possibilities for her that she didn't know existed. There were people who said, "You're doing this, but you're really capable of that." They helped her kind of reach for the stars. And she was from a town where not very many young people had uh, a lot of academic advancement, but she did. And so she was often the object of stories and accolades of different kinds because she was just such an up and comer. She made a point of, in the dream, letting me know that she turned down Stanford University. Well, I worked at Stanford for 7 years, and I mentioned that Stanford and Harvard, while I was there, went back and forth each year about which one turned down the largest percentage of their applicants. That was really a feather in your cap to be able to say that you were so elite that you turned down 96% of the people who applied for entrance. Well, it's funny because she when she moved into me with my permission, she mentioned Stanford and she says a whole section of my memories suddenly lit up. And um, I can remember how uh, at Stanford, as a Catholic chaplain, I was not on the payroll. I was adjunct, and there were times when you were reminded that you're not as important as other people around here because you're only adjunct. So there was that. Other times we were engaged by the official folk of the university with trying to recruit people who had been accepted. They called it Admit Weekend for admissions. Once they did uh, uh, offer an invitation for admission to that 4% that they approved of, they knew that lots of other elite schools had also admitted those same candidates. And so there was this push to try to get admitted students to actually come and attend. And so if a particular person on that list demonstrated that Catholic faith life was very important to them, the university would come to me and to my staff and ask for our help in putting the university's best foot forward so that this person might actually attend. Well, anyway, she wanted me to know that she was among those who could have gone to Stanford but declined to. Well, um, she explained that she was working in a laboratory as this PhD candidate, and she had created an experimental thesis that her research was going to try to demonstrate. I learned by working with PhD candidates at Stanford that their topic and their research and getting their findings to publication quickly was a very big deal. Most universities are majority undergraduate and then master's candidates and then a small portion of PhDs. Stanford is the opposite. They have more PhD and master's candidates than they do undergraduates. So when I started being the director there, I had to reapportion the talent and resources of my team to reflect that. I had not done very much work with graduate students, especially PhD candidates, but I learned that they needed to craft uh, a, a dissertation topic, a thesis project that they might spend several years working on. And it could be something very arcane. In fact, maybe you've had this experience of attending a graduation at where somebody is getting a PhD and their dissertation topic is announced aloud and there's laughter in the audience because just about everybody recognizes that none of us really know what that is. Sometimes that the knowledge that is, accumulated by a PhD candidate is so specific that only a very few other people in the world knows what they're talking about. Well, anyway, she created a research topic and she said, there was always the possibility that the causality that you were trying to show that this causes that, uh, it's an open question at the beginning of the research. You're not sure that this causes that, but maybe it does. Well, she said, if your thesis was proven true, you added new truth to the body of scientific knowledge in your field. That would bring you some accolades, and it made it easier for you to get funding for a next project. The other possibility is that you would put in maybe years of work trying to find out if this caused that, only to find out that it didn't. Well, you were still adding information to the body of knowledge by proving a negative result, but it wasn't as glamorous or attractive as a positive result. And there was temptation to fudge your findings and to even lie and say that false is true. Of course, that's very, very looked down upon in academia because all your colleagues are relying on you and each other to tell the truth about whatever it is your findings are, because they're going to base some of their own future work on what you contributed. And if you introduce a lie into the system, you bring everybody down. Well, that's what happened. She worked hard on a project that turned out to have the result that she didn't want. She couldn't prove the causality of this causing that, and she was afraid that if she just put the truth out there, that it would be more difficult for her to attract research monies to fund the next project, and so she lied. The shell game that I was talking about earlier, the moving thing that's under the shell, Shelley, the angel, said, well, she got involved in this shell game. And then later, Lupe told us herself that she she understood that at some point her lie became known. Then it was a question of who knew it and how many people would they inform and how might it travel up the chain. It could get her fired. Um, it could be the end of her pursuit of a PhD. It could now be part of her future resume that she lied about research findings. It looked like the world that she had been crafting all of her life was collapsing around her. That and like the hometown girl made good story now is going to be tainted by the fact that she was deceitful. All of this was going on, and um, for a few months she was able to continue on as normal, but the walls were closing in on her. In the dream, she showed us being on the outside of an academic building, overhearing conversation within about her deceit, and then someone coming toward her with two lit candles that were kind of symbolic of light uh, disclosing what it falls upon, uh, bringing to light something that was hidden. So if she would lose her position, she would lose her potentially the future that she was trying to build. She would even in the short run lose her campus housing and her job. Um, so she had a lot at stake. And sadly, she just defined her future as lost and are her hopes dashed. She said at elite universities, there was usually a suicide or two each year. And I saw that when I was at Stanford, other places too, but especially in places that are highly competitive, there can be this sense that I must always succeed at what I do or I'll be left behind. A lot of um, students at Stanford, when I was there, I heard the word competitive so often. And so I looked it up as I often do. I went to online etymology dictionary and typed in compete, and I knew co and com had to do with, but patere just means to strive. So to compete or to be competitive just means to strive with. It doesn't mean to dominate, vanquish, conquer. Um, it just means to strive with. A good example might be the way that athletes who want to improve in their athletic skill want to train or be in the presence of others who are as good as they are, maybe even a little better, because they want to improve their skills. They want to be more competitive. That doesn't mean they have to conquer the other one. They can strive together and both might help the other one improve. Well, um, I would try to tell my Stanford students, remember you came here freely. And you knew that before you came here that it would be a place with a lot of other really uh, highly talented students. So just calm down. You don't have to conquer the rest of the people in the class. Can't you just be a person who elevates? Can't you just be somebody who goes about your business in a way that uh, makes everybody around you smarter? The opposite of that, I think, is the word rival, which derives from the word river. A person who engages in rivalry looks at a river and claims the whole thing for themselves and kind of assumes that the whole thing must go down my throat. That entire river is mine, and should anyone else drink out of it, I'm somehow diminished. Well, that's not a world I want to live in. It can be fun to have a rivalry with a school at Stanford. It was Cal, and that could be playful and fun as long as it was within some sort of bounds of courtesy. That at the end of the game, there might be a little bit of teasing, but then we know that um, there'll always be a next game and a next opportunity for the other team to win the next one. But sometimes in higher academics, people felt like they can only get into medical school or to law school or to whatever the next rung of the ladder is by getting there before somebody else and fighting for that spot. I think a lot of the clamor about DEI in the culture and the political culture has been that idea that if anybody of color or women in male-dominated fields are given some advantage, it's stealing from somebody else. That's kind of been the way it's portrayed in the media. I don't really have to have a dog in that fight. I'm just focused here on Lupe and how that affected her. Well, anyway, she said that she did decide to end her life. And she didn't want to do it with drama. She didn't leave a note. She didn't want to make a mess. She said, I just thought I would take enough sleeping pills to put me to sleep so that I wouldn't wake up. She offered too that she says most college suicides use that route. Well, she did that. She just didn't want to wake up. And then she said, but I did wake up because we're eternal. However we die, by our own hand or any other way that we can leave this body, we go on. So she was not a religious person and she wasn't planning on there being an afterlife, but she landed in one and said, I didn't wake up, except I did. Then she found that she was in an environment in her afterlife that included a team of people who were dedicated to her care, um, which was a surprise to her. She didn't know there would be an afterlife. And then in the one that she was in, she wasn't shamed. She was just met and supported. She said some of the people who helped her initially were like professors or other people in a university staff that had different jobs to do, but the whole system was organized for her good and for her improvement. She said there were also team members who were other college students who had taken their life by suicide, but who were further advanced in healing than she was, and who could kind of come back toward her with a kind of a credibility that says, you can do this too, because we've just done it. She had to create a new idea about having a future that wasn't completely overshadowed by the shame of having been found out to be someone who deceived others in a very important way. So she got the opportunity to um, calm down, reflect, reassess, and see that there were potential futures for her that were positive and good. One of the ways that she went back to the idea of those in the dream of somebody coming toward her with two large lit candles, and she said that heraldry, the insignia of universities frequently has some Latin words that might have light in the phrase. Very often in the heraldry, there'll either be a flame, an oil lamp, a sun, something that has to do with light, because very often universities think of themselves as places of enlightenment, where they bring that light of new knowledge to people, certainly to their current students, and then their graduates can go on to bring greater light to the world in whatever their endeavors are. Well, she said, you know, I learned here that we all already emit light. We're all beings of light already. That was new to her. She thought of herself as having to strive to earn notice from other people and that she would go unnoticed unless she sort of created a light that she had emitted. And she said, I had to learn here that I was already a being of light, and all I really needed to do was be myself. And that everybody around me also is light if we could all just calm down and be the best version of ourselves that we can be, but we already emit light. And nobody has to um, fight to have a seat at the table or a place in the classroom or anything like that. Everybody is already beautiful and light. So she was able to accept herself in a way that she hadn't uh, during her time here on the earth and learn that lesson afterwards. I really liked the way that she explained that. At the end of the process, there's the need for them. They're going to move to a next place or advance or something, but they're going to go to a place that's unfamiliar, and they need someone to guide them, to bring them there. And when it came time um, for her to do that, the person who showed up for her was Jane Stanford. Well, Jane, I started praying to Jane and to Leland, the founders of Stanford University, when I first got there in 2007. And I learned their story. They had only one child that they had late in life, uh, Leland Jr. He had got admitted to Harvard, but died before he could attend there. He died at 16. I think it was typhoid. And they founded the university. They founded Stanford, and it's in their son's names, Leland Stanford Jr. University. And they decided that California, which was still a young state in the 1890s, needed uh, a a center of learning like the ones back east, but not just for a kind of an aristocracy, an American aristocracy, but it needed to be the California they felt like needed everything. It needed engineers, bridge builders, railroad builders. It needed government leaders. It needed all kind of things because it was still forming, and so was much of the West. So they wanted this university to have a very practical uh, orientation toward it, and they made it free for its first 20 years of existence. If you got accepted into it, you didn't have to pay tuition. Well, that's gone a long time ago. But they decided after their son died that they would adopt and educate the children of California. And instead of spreading their wealth around a lot of different charities, they put it into this one grand project. Leland was much older than Jane and he was less healthy. And he died pretty early on. But then for about the next, I think, 12 or 13 years, as the university was really getting underway, Jane was there all the time, running things. In fact, when I was there, when people would first, well, out during Advent weekend and then at the beginning of the academic turn, they always had an actress dressed as Jane in period clothing walking around the campus. You would just see Jane Stanford come up and talk to people and stay in character the whole time. So her presence was very large in the university. And and they built this huge chapel where I said mass. So I befriended her in prayer and got to know her a little bit in some dialogic prayer. Anyway, she came for Lupe, and Lupe said she doesn't want to talk. She doesn't feel the need to do that. She just wants to say hello to you, acknowledge you, but she's going to help me move along. It's kind of ironic because she had made a point, Lupe had made a point of not going to Stanford, but here came Jane Stanford to help a college student. She had a love for college students. So that's the basics of Lupe's story. When we do one of these stories, we do it on the podcast in three parts. Today is part one, where I just relate the story. You can read about it in book three, that's right over my shoulder there, and read the transcripts yourself. Then next week, I'll look at this story through the lens of what we call compassionate response. What does learning of Lupe's story evoke in the hearer? and how does compassion means to suffer with. In what way does her story touch upon some common chords? And then the third part of the trilogy is what we call spiritual practice. Is there some spiritual practice that seems to arise from listening to this story? So um, that'll be it for this time. However, I wanted to uh, let you know that this is the beginning of year 4 of our podcast. We're completing the third year. So I wanted to just thank those of you that have been along for this ride, either from the beginning or somewhere along the way. And also, one of the nice things that's happened that is a fruit of the podcast is that there has begun to be a little community of people who comment on either the video or audio platforms where they listen to the podcast or view it. And there's begun to be some online things that we do that bring people together where this was the way that they um, met. And what I'm trying to say and not saying is if you think that there's anybody that you know that might enjoy the content of the Joyful Friar, would you pass the information along to them? And if you haven't already, subscribed and liked and all of that, that would be good too. But anyway, I'm grateful to you for your interest and your support over these 3 years. Remember too that in my prayer life, I remember you frequently. When I do, my interest is particularly in overcoming anything that steals your joy. Most of the people that are in our stories went through some trauma, either at the time of their death or preceding it. Um, and sometimes people don't really heal from it during this lifetime. We just sort of adapt and maybe limp a little. We do the best we can to work around whatever um, hidden pain or sorrow there is inside of us. So anyway, when I pray for you, I pray that the Holy Spirit who lives in you would know exactly what part of you that's located in and might just quietly heal you in your sleep or without your knowing it, or maybe bringing something to consciousness that might be able to be healed through counseling work or some other way. Anyway, I just want you to be happy and be free to kind of shine the way that Lupe learned about. So, anyway, that's it for this episode of the Joyful Friar podcast. I'm Father Nathan Castle, thanking you for being with us. God bless you. Bye bye.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Joyful Friar. Please like, follow, and subscribe. You can visit me at nathan-castle.com. Send me a message by clicking the contact button. God bless.
Have you ever had to do something so difficult that you had to deal with it in stages? Imagine dying suddenly with no forewarning, being in a car crash, a shooting, a drowning. You leave your body, but then what? How do you transition into the afterlife? For some, it flows all at once, but not for everybody. For some, the process of transitioning into the afterlife is interrupted. Maybe there's a need for rest or for learning, or maybe just the chance to adjust to such an abrupt experience. I'm Father Nathan Castle. I'm a Catholic priest. About 23 years ago, the Holy Spirit began to send me people who had died traumatically. They entered my dreams during sleep, showing me what had happened to them and asking for help. They had died and moved on, sort of, but they'd come to a moment where it was time to complete the crossing. With the help of the angels and saints and earthly prayer partners, we've assisted more than 300 souls as they complete their crossing. You can read about it in my book series. Afterlife Interrupted books are available on Amazon. You can also learn more by visiting my website, nathan-castle.com.
God bless you.